Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's web seminar. My name is Mike Perkowski. I'm the moderator for today's program, Agentic AI in Banking. Before we get into our program, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our sponsor for today's program, H2O.ai. We appreciate their support. Today, we're very fortunate to have two industry speakers who know a lot about this topic and who are going to share a lot of their ideas and their insights and answer some of your questions as well on our program during this session. First, we're fortunate to have Annie Yan. Annie is Vice President and Head of Protect Product for TD Bank. Annie is responsible for North American fraud, insider, cyber, and other fin crime product roadmaps and delivery. She focuses on driving maximum value across these products and optimizing protection outcomes for customers and the bank. Annie is joined today by Sri Ambati. Sri is CEO and founder of H2O.ai, and he's a product visionary who has assembled world-class teams throughout his career. He founded H2O.ai in 2012 with a mission to democratize AI for everyone and anyone at anywhere, creating a movement of the world's top data scientists, physicists, academics, and technologists at more than 20,000 organizations worldwide. We're glad to have both of them with us here today. We have a lot of ground, so I'd like to start by just engaging our presenters in a little conversation first, just to get it started, and we're going to get into more of the meat of our discussion momentarily. Annie, I'd like to start with you. Obviously, TD Bank has been acknowledged as a leader in responsible AI adoption. Can you start by describing how the bank is approaching AI today and what a human-first or trust-first strategy really means in practice for your teams and your customers?
Thank you, Mike. I'm really happy to join all the audience and Sri as a long-term friend and partner in the AI world. And I wanted to start with the recognition of TD Bank has been on the AI journey for many years. And I think recently our CEO, Ray, has been talking about this at our Investors Day event as well. In this journey, we started off with leveraging AI from helping our internal decision, and then now we're actually expanding to supporting all of our colleagues and generating values for our customers. So starting off with looking at human first, and in the business of protecting customer, and that's core responsibility of my team. First thing first is that typically we'll be dealing with potential customer that potentially have been victimized by the bad actors. And those moments are actually very difficult in their life. So TD is taking an approach to make sure that we're actually present empathy, supporting our customers through those difficult times. One of the typical examples that I throw out there with many people is that we'll never put a bot to talk to our customer when they're actually going through a difficult time. So we will make sure that we apply those human factors in leveraging some of these automations and AIs that we use behind the scene. So we typically will be leveraging some of these technologies to help gathering information, sifting through signals that we are unable to find out by human being within a short time frame to support the humans to make the right decision at the right time. So that's when we say human first, is not forgetting the fact that, we're still interacting day to day with our customers who are real people, and they need that lens of the human factor to be in play at all times.
Okay, thank you, Annie. That's great. Sri, I'd like to come to you to ask this question. How is agentic AI different? And why is it transforming the banking industry in such a dramatic way?
Thank you. Thanks for having us. It's an incredible opportunity to partner with American Banker, but also with TD on this incredible journey. Just want to thank all Sri. The first and foremost about agentic AI is it's not the same as generative AI assistants that you've been used to, right? Um, Agents are far more capable. The way to think about that is if prompt engineering helped chatbots produce good responses, context engineering produces great responses for agents. Agents are one of the most popular agents, successful agents, a coding agent. Right? Sort of, everyone can, most of AI world is now using coding agents to take English and generate not just English, but actually code, right? And code that then can be executed to do different tasks. Tools, right? So suddenly went from improving the accuracy and recollection capability of an LLM, of a large language model, with more and more parameters and more training, to generating code and then executing the code. So as we know, software is eating the world, right? So in the same way, AI has now finally started eating software, which are generating software, which means that now with good English specification, a business user, a banking professional, right, can start having code generated to call tools, to produce dashboards, to produce summaries, to produce um, kind of actions to go do things. Right? So it's a substantially different paradigm shift where now suddenly, instead of being a retrieval of knowledge, our knowledge management system, it's become agency. So bankers can actually do things. What does that mean, right? So now you can take a very detailed domain expertise for the first time, and context becomes far more valuable. And all you need to do is then translate this detailed specification in English. And just like Mike, you know how you try to keep speakers from going off track, you have simple questions and answers. In the same way, we keep the LLMs from going off track and ask very, very simple, direct questions, and um, go and take that to produce good code, right? So when you produce good code, now you're able to call the right tool, and from the right tool, you can produce long context business tasks far more efficiently. So agents can have the potential to transform any business process into an AI program. And so that's a almost a nonlinear jump for deployment of AI across the bank. Some of my customers have reduced scams by about 70%, right? You take a more integrated view of looking at AI, which is how not just separate fraud or financial crime or cyber, but take a holistic view of your customer and customer experience, and which part of those customers are not necessarily the ones you that you could be suspicious about, and which transactions you could be suspicious about, and which ones you want to really promote and serve a lot more. And I think that's probably a question, probably eventually back to Annie, about how she's bringing an integrated view for financial crime, fraud, and cyber activity.
That's a really good question, Sri. And actually, you prompt me to think about one of the use cases that internally we've been looking at, right? So most commonly, we use it from a in-house development perspective, where we help using some of these capabilities to speed up our development cycle. And traditionally, like if you think about a simple use cases that we've been exploring and testing recently is what a bank has large amount of data. We have to move the data from one place to another place. And traditionally, we will have to hire business analysts, and then they do the mapping. They examine, metadata one by one from the original table structure to the new target place where we want it to be. This design cycle could be, depends on how much data we need to move. It usually will be weeks and weeks of time to analyze. Now, with Agentic AI, it not only helps you to understand the context of how it was originally being used, And then it also takes into the context of what your future use cases will be. And it comes up with the design recommendation. And we apply humans to say, does this design actually, meet the criteria? And then we use different type of prompting to say, hey, it needs to fit within a certain criteria. And we can now overlay even non-functional requirements to say, I want it to be fast in certain segments. I want it to stop and put a check in the middle. So that is a very powerful use case when it comes to speed of introducing changes now. So that's in-house from a development engineering aspect, which we are much more capable of coming up with changes, quality changes within a short time. It also plays an indirect role, right, in our ability to combat new threats, like to the topic that you were asking me. From a fraud and insider cyber perspective, these threats are coming at us at unprecedented speed, right? So everything is emerging, and if there's an attack happening, you will be seeing, deepfake as one of the examples. It changes very fast, and it can come with volume as well. So with the tooling that we're seeing out there. So in order to adapt and be able to counter these type of sophisticated threats that we're seeing, the speed of response becomes super critical, right? To be able to sift through which way did the bad actors break through the ecosystem? What are the tactics that they use? And what is the most feasible thing that I can do in my ecosystem with the code changes, with the rule changes that I can be able to put into production to defend becomes super critical. So with some of these tools that we're seeing, agentic AI is certainly helping us to stitch the context very quickly. It can help us to, generate the code, whether it's Python code, PySpark code, and any type of computer language. We're no longer limited with that human's knowledge on a specific type of coding language as well, as if you can speak 200 different languages. Whatever that you want to do that the system requires from the language to communicate with the system is no longer a barrier. So I think that's very, very critical when it comes to the defense strategy. And probably I will just touch a little bit on how can we kind of stitch a few things together in the concept of as well from between fraud, cyber, and AML, right? So and also piggybacking on the topic that you were talking about on the scam. So if you look at the current state of how a transaction manifested in our ecosystem, so a bad actor could be leveraging an account that they have taken over and then start transacting. And eventually this dirty money is going to go into some account and travel through the ecosystem, get layered, and becomes any money laundering problem. So in this scenario, and you will need to look through as a person that I'm actually reviewing this whole scheme. I will need to be able to understand the logs that are coming from the UI layer. How did they actually take over the account? And I need to understand how did the transaction actually get flow into multiple different ways in the ecosystem, because the money can be depleting from various rails. Could be a Swift rail, can be in this case sometimes in Canada can be email money transfer, in US could be Zelle. So there's many ways the money can move. And layer over on top of that, there's crypto as well. So the money can be moved in many ways, and it ended up in multiple different type of accounts. And eventually it becomes an aggregation where we start seeing it breaks the AML rules. In the past, this is almost impossible to stitch all this data together because they're so fragmented in the system. And all the system speaks different language. Like sometimes it's a mainframe, right? Sometimes it could be a modern Java-based platform. It could be an Oracle database that's storing it, and then goes to a completely different, Databricks ecosystem to process it. So think about amount of technology and the different type of language that we use in the ecosystem. To stitch a full picture together is very complex. Now, with the generative AI power and with some agentic support, we could be pulling all these things and unify into something that the human can easily understand, and then take task based on humans' instruction. So this is the power that we were not able to do in the past, because this means hundreds of people and each have their specialty sitting together in the meeting room trying to stitch it together. Now you actually have, hundreds of um, digital agents that's helping you to do the same task. So this power is something that we never had in the past. So we're really looking forward to embrace it further, obviously in a very responsible way, and making sure that they still have the oversight from the human.
That is
Okay.
so
Well,
awesome.
thank you both.
I think
Great.
it's almost like a business user, Mike, like bankers on the call, having the power of an entire software team, right? An army of software engineers, architects, data engineers, folks who are able to quickly produce analysts who can bring all of this together, because Annie can give a very detailed description of what she wants. And the more detail one can specify what they want, the more quickly agents are able to translate that to code and then action, and protect the bank and protect the consumers and the clients. So it's really one of the unique times to rethink all of the bank in an agentic frame. Right? So, some of our customers are beginning to think an agentic bank all in. Of course, it's easier to do something fresh, but I think we are in a regulated industry, so we have all the various um, pieces that come to fore in the banking space, where banks have been using models for a very long time. Many of them were not even predictive AI models. Some of them became predictive AI models, and some of them became generative AI models. And then, of course, agents integrates them all. And so with agents, you can call your traditional rule engine, traditional decision tree, or a random forest, or the latest LLM to solve the problems at hand. So you can pick the right ones depending on how regulated that part of the bank function is.
Okay. Well, that's you've both done a really good job in explaining this transition that AI is going through, and from prediction to action, and helping banks like TD not just detect risk, but also respond in real time. So I'd like to take a moment to hear from our audience a little bit about see how this plays out in their real world settings. So let's go to the first of our polling questions, and we'd like to hear from you, members of our audience. All right, our question is the follow. Is your organization currently evaluating or implementing a generative AI or agentic AI use case? And here are your choices. Please select the one that best describes what's going on in your organization. Yes, we are actively implementing one. We are evaluating opportunities. We're in the early exploration stage. We're planning to explore a use case in the next 12 months, or we have no plans at this time. So, and once again, our question is your organization currently evaluating or implementing a generative AI or agentic AI use case? Yes, actively implementing, evaluating opportunities, early exploration stage, planning to explore in the next 12 months, or no plans at this time. All right, we're going to give about another 5 seconds or so to give everybody a chance to cast their ballot. We have a very good input. By the way, we have a very large audience here, which is great. We appreciate all of you taking time to attend this program, and we encourage you to also put your questions for our speakers in the Q&A panel as well. All right, great. We have a critical mass, so let's see what the results look like. All right, so almost 40%, 39 of you say that you are actively implementing a use case for Gen AI or agentic AI. 26% say that you're evaluating opportunities, 20% in the early exploration stage, and 8% planning to explore in the next 12 months. And only a handful of you, 8%, saying that you have no plans at this time. I just curious, Sri, does this surprise you that we have such a large participation by the audience in actually developing use cases?
Actually, what's very positive is that such a large part participation of our own audience on this particular. Kudos to both TD and American Banker to bring such a vibrant participation even on this webinar itself. But it's really exciting time for transformation of the industry, right? So it's more than, you can see 92% of the audience is overwhelming majority of them are beginning to use AI or evaluating AI. I think what's actually interesting is that 40% of them are actively implementing one, which is really, really awesome. And I think it's not a surprise at all. Many of our customers are deploying this, are already in late stage of deploying this into their production systems. There's a lot of, you can still see that there's about 50% of them evaluating, exploring, because there's so much change. The rate at which AI is changing is causing a lot of noise as well, right? So some really good signals of success, but I think maybe that's a good question, prompt to the next question that you would like to ask Annie as well.
Okay, great. So that gives us a really good sense of where our audience is. Annie and Sri, I'd like to dive back in with you both now about uh, where banks should start when evaluating these technologies. And specifically, let's talk about some real world application for fraud and risk. Annie, I'd like to hear from you. TD has been exploring how AI can strengthen fraud protection, obviously, fraud prevention. What opportunities are you seeing for agentic AI to help analysts uncover new fraud patterns or to improve detection accuracy?
Thanks, Mike. I think this we touch on this a little bit early on. I will expand on the conversation earlier. So when we think about fraud prevention specifically, it requires a large amount of data for analysis. We look at humans' behavior, and this is not new because this has been in business for a long time. So we do look into what is the person's normal behavior versus if a bad actor taking over the account, we do expect the behavior to be slightly different. So this has been a long term that we look into behavior analysis. We do leverage AI. Now think about the opportunity here for taking it into the next level, which is agentic, where we are now able to also take action. So when in the context of something doesn't look normal, traditionally it will be engaging the customer, engaging some kind of call center to outreach to the customer, and then we take actions from there. Now, with agentic in place, the future is possible in front of us to look into, can we challenge a customer? Can we put the right friction, right? More in an automated fashion, leverage agentic, put the context in front of the customer and say, are you actually in this location? Is that truly you? And you can put some level of friction to allow the customer to think about it themselves. So these are the things that we are unable to achieve the level of dynamic that we need, right, to manage balance between the friction versus what we want, how we are going to protect the customer. But with agentic, this is not that difficult. Obviously, we do need to make sure that we put the sufficient guardrail that it doesn't start to interact in any negative way with the customer. So I think at TD, we take a very cautious approach. We haven't put anything in front of our customer yet. We do start prompting or start helping some of the internal users. And one of the public ones that we've been actively talking about is in our call center today, we do use generative AI to support our agents to figure out what is the next step on the call to help the customer. Let's say if they need to process they need to open up a loan. They need to, get guidance in terms of claim on a transaction that they did not make those transactions. In the past, like an agent themselves has to search through hundreds of pages to figure out what is the right step that they're going to guide a customer. So now with generative AI, we actually shorten that amount of time for searching, within seconds. We will be able to give the most relevant next step to the customer right in front of their eyes. We have not gone into fully agentic, meaning, hey, here's the step, I'm going to do it for you, for cautious reasons, right? There is risk. We need to make sure that every time we provided a guidance, let's say you're supposed to cancel this transaction, if this is the guidance, and we actually are capable of providing consistent guidance. No matter is it Sri calling in or Annie calling in, that guidance is the same for that particular context and for that particular activity. Right now, we're still working through to drive that consistency, which is the RAG component. And without that component, we're not going to feel comfortable with the level of consistency. Therefore, internally, the human is going to look at the result and say, yes, it is the right context, and I'm going to tell the customer. So there's a filtering activity, right? That's why we use human first at the moment. And that's part of the maturity curve that we're going to be building. As we becoming more comfortable, we have the right guardrails, we may not need humans to check every single time. But for now, we're still saying, okay, if you need to do this action, human needs to keep an eye out for it first, and then make that final decision. It speeds up the decision cycle, but it's not making the decision yet. But the end state would be eventually, if with the right guardrail in place, we might be comfortable for certain activities to be action by the agentic component directly.
Great. Thank you, Annie. Sri, I'd like to come to you and ask you, how can domain experts and business analysts better leverage agentic AI to amplify their decision making?
I think we touched on this a little while ago, and actually part of the goes back to your um, results of the poll, right? Um, Customers are beginning to ask, where is the ROI from, right? And I think that's why there's a lot longer exploration phase. It's a longer experimentation phase, right? So, and so the MIT paper that came out recently about ROI on AI and Gen AI specifically is mostly related to the cost level, right? So, and I think how we can reduce ease of experimentation, ease of getting to production. I think business analysts and domain experts are able to, I mean, as I mentioned, can write detailed specification of what they want. Agents are translating that to code and actions. And the other theme that Annie touched on, which is data, data quality, data integration, change data capture. How do you bring? Sometimes the real-time systems have already marked, payment systems have already marked a particular transaction to be monitored or to be suspicious. By the time it gets to the data lake, right? So the delays are always where losses accrue. I think that ability to go from batch to real time, business analysts can now go from essentially idea to code to action much faster. Charts, generating reports, a lot day in the life of middle offices to get a lot of ad hoc reports out to the front office and decision makers. I think a lot of that can be streamlined with agents. And I think verticalizing these agents is actually where the world is really, most of our customers are going there. And so we have two different school of thoughts here. Folks who are building a lot of point solutions and point agents, and folks who are trying to go to a generalized agent that can solve a lot of different tasks. And the path H2O has taken is we have a very good planning agent. We have the world record in deep research. It's a generalized agent that can be then, it's a big planner, it's a big brain, and it's able to then call purpose-built tools. It can call even our own data science agent, predictive AI agent. It can call BI You can produce BI dashboards. You can produce PowerPoint. One of our customers has a good agent that builds company specialized PowerPoint, and then changing that PowerPoint real time. Business users are spending a lot of this time. They'd much rather go solve big problems, decisions, and strategy. They're pulled into the day to day of creating um, content to get the rest, rally the rest of the organization or their clients. And I think a lot of those tasks can be now digitalized and agentified. So agents can be really a force multiplier. So AI is at a place where through agents, traditional expertise can be amplified faster, right? So it's not replacing domain experts. In fact, the experts are able to use agents better to amplify their voice, amplify their work, amplify their impact on the planet. And I think that's what we're seeing more and more of is agents have not replaced the most sophisticated software engineer, coding agents, for example. The sophisticated software engineers can now use coding agents to bring, not just build a small window, because that's what it'll take half a day to build. It will build the whole city, right? So architecture, integration, ability to think the big picture and integrate it into a well-specified outcome. That's where agents are able to bring to bear. As you see in the slide here, we're not only building one transaction monitoring agent, we're able to bring the ability to bring kind of all of the end-to-end of financial crime into one umbrella using agents.
Sure. I want to touch on the fact that you were talking about the ROIs, and this is very interesting. Um, Internal discussions, and also I've been talking to lots of our peers around this topic, because there's also a general school of thoughts around um, looking at the cost of the GPU that might be becoming a burden on the, it's almost like the salary you need to pay for these agentic agents, how quickly that will kind of taper up. I mean, this is uh, really top of mind, right, when it comes to managing the cost. Do you want to just elaborate a little bit in terms of the school of thoughts around, can you reuse some of the results, right, through the reg component, the context, to manage some of these costs? And I was very excited to see some of these measurements in terms of performance of different algorithm that we can, from LLM all the way to bring it down to an SLM, how much of a saving that you're seeing from a cost aspect as well.
Well, I think, I mean, token explosion, right, as you call it, a lot of tokens are being used by many of our customers. It's actually a good metric, right? It means customers are adopting agents and generative AI across the board. But I think a vast majority of those use cases are sometimes easily solved with the smaller model, right? So in a contact center, for example, one of our customers took their call center use case and broke that down to 80 class classification problem. So they took a smaller SLM, or 2 billion parameter model instead of a 200 billion parameter model, right? So it uses less GPUs, right? So, and fine-tuned it to a far more purpose built on their customer conversations. Now, one is cost, but also latency. Small models are faster. You can host them yourself, or you can own the asset. You can put conversations. Otherwise, you would not want to send to open kind of public clouds or OpenAI or Claude. And so you kind of literally are able to own that asset yourself. I think the distill and fine tune SLMs has been a very interesting draw. We did that as more as an experiment to learn how to build models at small scale, but it turns out embedded SLMs is a thing, and it has we have seen a lot of use cases, including fraud prevention at AT&T. or prompt to SQL, or even call centers. We've seen deployment of the SLMs. But I think if you zoom out a second, I think right, so the base models are getting better and better and better, right? So as a result, you can in a focused space reduce hallucinations. Hallucination is a feature, not a bug, right? But when you put to a constrained environment like coding, you can reduce hallucinations and get to a much longer chain of thought. So as a result, run deep research or deep thinking longer and get to simple, much more kind of deeper insights on for the question you've asked, as opposed to the out of the box top level response based on popularity of a particular content. And I think that's been a big game changer because once you start building purpose-built tools, right? We have a lot of these tools that are focused on essentially, let's say, Wikipedia or changes in the Wikipedia content, and web archives, internet web archives, to see what happened in the past with the same particular company. Look at PDFs, financial documents, look at your own content, overlaying your content with other content. One of our customers wanted to build credit memos for mid-market customers, and the entire end-to-end agent flow, including their homegrown data and public data. They're able to create in a matter of minutes what would have taken days, right? And in the template that they want, in the format that they can present to their credit officers. And so all of these use cases are historically been kind of research use cases with a time limit, time boundedness. You can able to do those with a fraction of the cost and fraction of the time. ROI is a good question, right? It's also in the Q&A section there. The ROI from AI, surprisingly, has come from not the most popular use cases, but the boring ones, right? Sort of like the hidden back office use cases, HR use cases for kind of things that are not your prominent ones needing a substantial change in business processes. But I think there's no portion of the bank that will remain untouched with agentic AI. Almost the entire bank is going to go through the change. All of our lives are going to be transformed with this new superpower, right? So if everybody used to assembly language, coding is almost obsolete because people higher level languages are able to produce that. The latest higher level language is English, right? So using English, you're now able to generate such amount of code and agency that you're able to now transform pretty much very deep, complex policies to processes. Some of our customers begin to think about the bank as what are the obligations of the bank, and then rethink from the obligations in, as opposed to policy to process to what is really happening, right? So you're building from policy, what are the processes inside the bank, and then are these being followed? I liked Annie's classic use case, which we will share. Like, for example, if you have encryption requirement for 128-bit or 256-bit at rest, is all your software following that encryption? How do you do that? You used to do a poll before, and now you can actually run an agent that checks across all your software stacks if it's actually as advertised.
Thank you, Sri. Andy, I'd like to come back to you and ask you a question about financial crime. We know that TD Bank has taken an integrated approach to fighting financial crime and as well as fraud and cyber threats. Can you share how your team is connecting these areas and how Agentic AI fits into that strategy?
So, yes, definitely happy to touch on it a little bit. As I mentioned, like there is always going to be a focus on, prevention, which is a lot of times that we treat the predicate crime like fraud, or sometimes even physical harms and cyber separately from the traditional, fin crime space. When we integrate, meaning we do share end to end. We see through an event. We do referral between the different teams. So these are the different things that we do to connect the dots. And then through this process, as I mentioned earlier, they usually have lots of analysis traditionally that we have to do but when we hand over, when we do even when we design our rules for detection or models for detection, traditionally they're rather silo, right? So but with the new capability that we're seeing now, it's way easier to, number one, consume the feedback loop properly. And the feedback loop becomes really important for all of the areas to learn how did it happen? Can we perform better? Can we catch it a little bit earlier? So that's integrated approach allow us to share the feedback way better than before. And that kind of pushes the timeline on catching some of these problems from, sometimes in the past could be weeks, months, or sometimes years, some of the bigger problems to, within minutes or seconds. So this is actually allowing us to, number one, being stronger in detecting something that is a known pattern as a bad activity way faster. And then also allow us to start seeing anomalies at an unprecedented speed, right? So that's what the power of integrating give it to us. Now, but from an agentic perspective, as I mentioned earlier, it is something that allows us to stitch. I look at it as this is what Sri was calling it, as an unexpected area is more for me is very prominent from a tech for tech perspective, because these silo ecosystems are built in different era. And sometimes you don't have the luxury of touching every pieces at the same time. With the agentic AI, you actually break that barrier of, let's say, language barrier, protocol barrier, because now you have this Superman that can speak anything, any language that you want, and be able to help you, right, to identify things you couldn't see before. So we are able to connect the different pieces in the ecosystem way easier, right, with the agentic support. And the goal here is to use it to help us to simplify. Our target number one is to simplify, and then use the tool to allow us to unify our stack, speak the same language. Therefore, when you speak the same language, the big picture comes together very quickly. So that's the angle of how we are looking at leveraging in agentic AI specifically. And then this is also including some of the um, uh, earlier we had a slide talking about specifically on deepfake as well, because in pockets of areas that we have seen, even our peer banks have seen deepfake becoming a really top of mind risk that everybody has to deal with some of the and deepfake is definitely generated through really complex AI tools. It's easy to use, but behind the scene, the algorithm can be very complex, and it becomes more and more real. Like even humans are unable to differentiate the differences anymore. And this is where the power of leveraging some of the agentic components could be more helpful. Right now, we're leveraging the traditional VLM or LLM uh, AI models to help us to differentiate and catch the differences. But then, as you can see, when we do 7 layers of activity, this requires some level of connections between them. And this where we see agentic can become very handy, that you can stitch the context now with the actual deepfake model, could be a deterministic model in the middle. And then you can look into your authentication and session binding, how strong that is, all in by different vertical agents, and then they can work together. So this is how we're looking into approaching the problem. As the threat becomes more sophisticated, the coordination between the different layers becomes important. And that's where I see, as we become more integrated and leveraging agentic, this can be actually doing the impossible, that human is nearly impossible to stitch everything together at that pace. So we will definitely need to leverage some kind of technology to achieve that.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Andy. Sri, I want to come to you for a minute. The few remaining minutes that we have before we take some audience questions, talk a little about AI maturity. So, how are you seeing banks accelerate the AI maturity curve? And what's the role of partners and open ecosystems in helping them get there faster?
Well, I think over the years, right, banks are not new to maturity. And banks are the original data companies, right? Over the years, they have models for everything. So math, quantitative thinking. We learned our earliest customers were like in the cards business, the Capital One, and they truly kind of put subprime. They figured out such good detailed mathematical models that even traditional scores like FICO and other scores were not very effective, and that they could build really good behavioral models who's likely to pay back a loan, right? So from that point to fraud prevention models to over the years, banks, we worked with Commonwealth Bank of Australia, TD, Wells Fargo, kind of Citi, most of the banking customers we've had built really sophisticated machine learning methods, and they were well regulated, used by, approved by the regulators, and all the nine yards. I think it's coming down to agentic and generative AI. I think their data that they are being trained on is not coming from the banks. So the fact that banks are a bit careful and making sure that these models are well validated, the kind of the traditional model risk management framework for predictive AI, what portions of that can be applied for generative AI and agentic AI. Those kind of have been a fair bit of discussion amongst our customers. And it turns out AI can generate really good test code as well, right? So you can use AI to validate AI and really be good at red teaming your model, red teaming your end-to-end processes, and build enough amount of tests, right? So the biggest piece that we are seeing customers use is one, write detailed RFPs for what they want, and from the RFPs generate test code. And so the more tests we have, more evaluations you have. It's an eval first approach to rolling out agentic AI. And the more evals they have, the more quickly models are moving. AI is moving so fast as you rip and replace previous last year's model GPT-4 to GPT-5, or going from Claude 3.7 to Claude 4.5, right? When you're jumping model to model and framework to framework, these tests and these documented kind of specifications are the true gold standards. And then having ground truth tests labeled kind of expected responses, that becomes the true guiding function for how accurate the particular AI is for your specific use case. And I think that's a place having a partner who you can trust. I think one of the other findings in the MIT paper is only 1/3 of pure homegrown efforts succeeded, right? So the 2/3, 66% of success that was seen was mostly because you had a partner along with you who's trusted in your success, right? Many of our H2O is very uniquely, we're privileged to have worked with some amazing people like Annie and others. They actually used our platforms over the years, right? So our Capital One customer went on to become a customer at Wells Fargo, and then eventually a customer now at Citizens Bank. Our customers at RBC introduced us to Combank, and eventually Combank, and that's where Annie brought us to TD. So we have this pedigree of customers who trust us, and over the years have carried us, our platforms along with them. But that kind of long-term thinking where people, most of the audience in the banking audience today the people will take us with them. So people live longer than companies. So partners and vendors in AI should think long term when they're partnering with a bank or partnering with an entrepreneur in a bank. Change is eventually hard, and large organizations prevent change. So I think that most of the folks in the audience are bringing change in large banks, which are heavily regulated. So partners who can empathize with that, walk a mile in the customer shoes, can truly make them successful.
Excellent. Thank you, Sri. So we're getting near the end of our program, but we have a lot of really good questions from our audience, and I'd like to bring a few of them out for our presenters. And by the way, if any of you have asked a question and it's not answered on the program here today, someone from H2O.ai will get back to you as soon as possible after today's program. Okay, Annie, let's go to you. This question is specifically for you. In the use case Annie mentioned, is this agentic AI or Gen AI? And then they clarified, is the call center agent asking questions to the AI, asking the next steps, or is an agentic AI telling the call center agent itself?
Yeah, so that's the transition that we're looking into. So today we're still generative AI based, as I mentioned earlier, because there's obviously some discomfort of letting the agent, digital agent in this case, to be sitting at the driver's seat, right? So as I mentioned, we are actually still having a human first approach where we use generative AI to help us to guide where's the fast, which is the procedure I should look next. So that's very generative approach, traditional generative approach. Um, and as you pulled out the script of the activity could say click button A and then go to click button B, right? As an example, in the real agentic scenario, that next two steps of clicking A versus clicking B could be done by a bot or another agent. However, we haven't taken that step, but because it requires proper evaluation. So I think to Sri's point earlier, do we have all the test cases, positive and negative? Do we have the right evaluation framework? So that's what we're assessing right now and making a very careful decision before we will take that step. So and that's a very good clarification. We internally we have been looking into, how can we use it? How can we do more with it, and to achieve more automaticity to drive that end to end, and that requires the evaluation framework to be very solid. And I want to make sure that the audience still don't get the wrong impression here, because it is very critical to make sure both the positive path is clear, but also that what are the bad things could happen, and you protect yourself from going down the wrong path as well.
On the call center question, if I may take it, I'll share some. I don't know. Can you see the screen here? So the call center for AT&T, right? It was working very well with large language models, but I think the latency was the big one. And I think what we did was essentially distill, fine-tuned a small language model, H2O Danube in this case. We can do it with Llama as well, or Gemma, and then produce a much smaller model that can respond at a fraction of the time. And of course, the cost drops dramatically as well. I think we touched on, and he was asking, prompting a question around how SLMs can help in that scenario. And I think it's now integrated into their autonomous end-to-end function as well. I think someone on the call was actually asking a question on how do you have an agent? How does it work? And I just want to take a quick piece to kind of showcase how the agents actually work. And I was running how should one protect the bank with integrated view of financial crime, fraud, and cyber. As you can see, it's a pretty powerful agent with a lot of sub tools and kind of tasks. And these agents are easy to MCP, plug and play different agents and tools that are available in the market that you can bring easily, smoothly. Different models as well can be brought, not just agents, right? You have a very rich ability to be fluid. The space is changing so fast that the partners who can allow you to bring the best of breed easily, who can also compete with the best of breed out there, or at least curate them for you so that you don't have to go through curation yourself. Those are kind of some of the characteristics of our generalized agent. But I think in general, I would say these are kind of really wonderful, unique times where bringing the holistic view of the bank and solve for true integrated thinking of business and technology to get the highest ROI from the transformation with agents. That's the that's what most of our customers are beginning to. The companies with best cultures are thriving. It's a fast-moving space, but also fast-moving teams and squads that can move agilely. That's the kind of the biggest change we're seeing now.
Okay, thank you, Sri. So, ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude our program for today. I want to thank our presenters, Annie and Sri, for sharing so much insight and offering so many actionable ideas for you today. I know that you'll take back a lot of really great ideas and advice as you build out your own agentic AI use cases. Again, I want to acknowledge and thank H2O.ai for sponsoring today's program. We appreciate their support. And last but not least, we want to thank all of you who attended this program today. We're glad you could take time out of your busy day to learn more about this topic. And we hope you'll join us for a future web seminar brought to you by American Banker and its partners. So on behalf of your producers, your hosts, your sponsor, and your presenters, thank you all for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. We hope you have a great and safe day. Take care.